I spent 11 years as a combat medic, and the last 4 of those as a field surgical team coordinator attached to various forward units. When you do that work, you become very good at 2 things that most people would not expect to go together: triage, knowing immediately what is serious and what can wait, and paperwork, because every serious thing that happens in a forward surgical environment has to be documented accurately, completely, and before you sleep, no matter what the sleep situation is. I want to say that because it explains my vantage point at the time of the events at FOB Khenrath, and also because I think it is relevant to understanding the woman this story is about. She came to FOB Khenrath in late autumn as part of a medical liaison exchange, specifically as a medical planning specialist, which is the type of role that attaches to forward units for the purposes of coordinating medical resource management across a multi-unit theater. It is not a combat operations role. It is a planning and documentation role, which is how she was classified, and which is how the FOB's operations element classified her when she arrived. She was introduced at the morning brief as attached medical planning support. The operations officer, I will not use his name, made a comment. I want to be careful about how I describe this comment. It was not a direct insult, but it was the particular kind of comment that communicates an assessment without being specific enough to address. He said something about the weather analysis looking like a good use for a planning specialist, and then he moved on. The implication was legible. She did not respond to it. She wrote something in the logbook she carried and looked at the map. 2 days later, the situation developed. I'm not going to describe the tactical specifics in full because they are not mine to tell. What I am going to describe is the medical planning element, which is what I witnessed. We had a forward surgical team at Point Bravo, 4 people, my colleagues, exposed after the relay vehicle took an IED contact on the northwestern approach. They had medical supplies, they had 2 serious non-ambulatory patients, and the road access was compromised. Standard medical route was out for a minimum of 6 hours for the engineering clearance. The operations officer was running the tactical response on the main situation. The medical piece was going to have to solve itself. She had been on the FOB for 2 days. She had the medical resource map that she had been building since her first morning. I know this because I had given her access to the supply logs as part of the liaison protocol, and I had watched her cross-reference everything meticulously. She came to me at 07:20 with 3 routes and an air asset window. I want to be precise about what she presented, not one contingency plan, not a general assessment. 3 specific routes with timing calculations, road surface ratings from the engineering reports I hadn't thought to pull, an identification of a medical resupply forward cache at grid 7 November that nobody on the current rotation knew about because it had been positioned by the previous rotation 8 months prior and never appeared in the standard resource log, and an air asset window, 34 minutes, transport helicopter available if requested by 0750. She knew about the cache because she had noticed a discrepancy between the supply log I had given her and a secondary inventory reference document she had found in the FOB's administrative archive. She had found it on her second morning and added it to her map. I submitted the air asset request at 0744. The helicopter reached Point Bravo at 0912. Both patients were evacuated to the main surgical facility. The route she recommended: the third option, northern bypass, road surface rating 7 on the engineering scale, passable for medical resupply vehicle, was confirmed clear at 1000. The resupply reached the forward team at 1050. The operations officer asked at the afternoon debrief who had put together the route options. I said, the planning specialist. He looked at his notes. He said, the medical planning exchange attachment. I said, yes. There was a pause. He said, the cache at grid 7 November. That's not in the standard resource log, I said. She found it in the administrative archive, secondary inventory reference document. She noticed the discrepancy on her second morning. He made a note. She was asked to brief the full operations element at the following morning's briefing. Not the medical logistics piece, the full operations element. She briefed for 22 minutes. At the end, the operations officer said, there are 2 route planning scenarios I would like your assessment on before the end of the week. She said, I can have them by tomorrow morning. I watched her leave the briefing. I want to put something in this account that I do not think goes in the official record, but that I think is accurate. She had been given a role description that underestimated her by the width of an entire classification tier, and she had spent 2 days building the resource map anyway, And on the morning it mattered, she had walked in at 0720 with 3 routes and an air asset window and the reference number of a forward cache that nobody else knew existed. She came to the medical tent that afternoon to update the resource log. I said, "Those 2 scenario assessments the CO asked for." She said, "Yes." I said, "Do you want the engineering database access?" She said, "That would be helpful." She opened the logbook and wrote down the credentials. She asked for the engineering database because she was already working on the scenarios. She had been working on them since the debrief ended. That is the accurate description of what I witnessed. I am a medic. I document what I see.